Bike check, bike check. This is Evan Jones, Let's Go Ride Bikes. I'm here today to share my 2018 Specialized Enduro Elite 29. It's a super fun bike. I picked it up in the spring this year. Been riding it all summer. Got about 400 and something kilometers on it. Bike's a size medium. I tried the large, just didn't quite feel right. It was a little too stretched out for me when I was climbing, so ended up on the medium. I'm about 5'10", 155 pounds, so I'm not a huge dude. I find the medium fits me really well. Gets me nice and centered on the bike, and still plenty stable and when things get rowdy and fun. So the frame, it's being the Elite version, it's front carbon. The rear end's aluminum on it. I've wrapped a number of areas on the frame, some critical spots with 3M tape. So far it's done me pretty well. Laid it down a few times in the rock, so it's got a few little cosmetic scratches here and there, but overall it's doing real well. With the front end being carbon, I get the SWAT, which is awesome. I love the SWAT. And I've also got the head tube chain tool. Suspension, this bike came out of the box with the Ohlins RXF36 STX, 160 millimeters of travel. So that means it's got the single tube damper. Rear shock is RockShox Monarch Plus. I think in this frame it's 165 millimeters of travel. Suspension pressures, everyone wants to know what's going on. So for fork pressures, I've got 72 psi in the main chamber and 190 psi in the ramp chamber. For my weight, the main chamber is quite a bit lower than what the factory recommended settings are, and I'm pretty much right on the money for the ramp up chamber. And I've got about 130 psi in the rear shock. It gets me about 15% sag in the front and 28% sag in the rear. I just like having the front end a little higher. It feels a little more stable when you get going down some of this steep, chunky, rough stuff, to have the back end kind of drop down a little bit more. Keeps the front end a little higher. The cockpit comes pretty much all the stock affair. Got the Specialized 800 millimeters and a DH bar. It's got the stock Specialized 45 millimeter stem. And I'm running the Specialized type single-sided locking grips. One thing you'll notice about my cockpit is that my levers are very flat. I've got bad wrists, so I like to run the levers pretty flat. It just helps me to relax and rest my wrists a little. Running Chromag Scarab pedals. Had them on my last bike, and I just really like them. And then my seat is Specialized hinge, just what came on the bike. Wheels. It's all stock here, so Roval Traverse 29 millimeter internal width tires. I'm running the stock Specialized Butchers. It's a great casing. They're gripped on compound. I'm running tubeless. Got a Huck Norris installed. Tire pressures, I run 24 in the front and 26 in the rear, and it seems to do pretty well to get compromised with grip, traction, and also just a little bit of protection against the rocks and sharp edges and stuff. Brakes. I've got SRAM code R's, front and rear, stock brakes that came on the bike. It's got a 200 millimeter front rotor, 180 millimeter rotor in the rear. Drivetrain is the SRAM GX 11 speed, and then it's got race face Affect cranks. Otherwise it's all 100% SRAM, and it's super reliable, just works. Now while it's got your attention, let's do a bit of a bike review. A little late to the game with the 2018 model, but I figure, I've got some good seat time on it now, and I've got some good experience, so maybe there's a few of you out there who are looking at a bike like this sometime in the future, and this will be some good information for you. There's a few differences between this bike and the 2017 version of this bike. Primarily it's the frame. They redid the molds, and it's longer, lower, slacker. All the industry buzzwords, this bike is that. So they also integrated a flip chip into the rear suspension yoke, which I have not touched. It comes from the factory in the low setting, and that's where I've left it. One other thing that they changed on the 2018 versus the 2017, I believe, is a threaded bottom bracket. So no more creaks, and it's one of the things I really like about this bike, is it's really quiet. I really like how stiff the bike is. The linkages are beefy. It's got big bearings throughout, I think they're all the same bearings. So if you ever have to service anything, that's pretty awesome. Because this bike is the 29-inch wheel version, it's also compatible with the 27 plus wheels and tires. And then you just have a 7mm BB drop, so you have some nice flexibility if that's something that you want to try out. Of course, you got to have an extra set of wheels, so not necessarily the cheapest thing in the world, but you can do it. Got internal cable routing. Look inside the SWAT box, you can see how the cables go through the down tube. It's super quiet, and I assume that it's really easy to work on, but I don't work on bikes, at least not in that capacity. So I can't comment too much there. Looking at all the different parts on the bike, I really like the brakes. The Codars are great. They've got lots of power, good modulation. I find they're a little bit noisy. If you listen to any of my videos or watch any of my videos, it's pretty dusty here, and with the metallic pads, they just squeak, and that's just the way they are. I previously had guide RSs on my last bike, and I like the Codes more. So with the SRAM GX 11 speed, definitely times I wish the bike had the GX Eagle. I don't know why this bike didn't come with the GX Eagle, but it didn't. But all of that said, the GX 11 speed is notoriously robust and dependable, and like I said before, it just works, and I've never had any issues with it. And the fork, so the Ohlins fork is a bit of a point of contention with a lot of people. It's kind of got this reputation for being really hard to tune and set up, and I kind of will echo that a little bit, but I found the sweet spot eventually. So it took a little bit more messing around to get it there, but once I kind of figured it out, I've been really happy with it. I've never had any issues with my seals or bushings or anything like that, which is some of the common complaints. I just really like it. It's super stiff, and I find it performs really well doing the kind of riding that I like to do. The rear shock, I don't have much to say. Set it and forget it. Tried and true. RockShox Monarch Plus. It's a super popular shock. It's on tons of bikes, and it's a great shock. The wheels, I'm not super happy with the Roval Traverse wheels. I've never really liked Roval Traverse wheels. I had a set on my old bike, and I didn't like them then either. I actually replaced them with the Stan's Flow MK3s, which are a far superior wheel. The wheels that are on the bike, they come from the factory, hand built, and they have straight pull spokes. So just the very nature of the straight pull spokes, they come loose all the time, and it's just the way they are. So they stay straight despite the fact that they come loose, which is good. I do like that these are wider than, they've got their 29mm internal width, so they're beefy. They've got lots of side to side stiffness. Now tires, just to start out with, I'm a Maxxis guy. I love DHRs on the front and back of my bike. It's just a really good combo for me. Really confidence inspiring, and that's just what I like to run. Now this bike has the Purgatories with the grid casing and the grip-down compound. So it's kind of like the comparable tire to like a DHR2 with EXO casing and the 3C compound. But I find that the Specialized tires are a little harder actually. So despite the fact that they're the grip-down compound, they're harder. They've actually lasted a lot longer for me, which is surprising. I would go through a set of 3C compound tires like in a couple months, whereas I've been going all summer on the first set of tires that came on this bike. So I like that they wear longer. I don't have to replace them as much. The Specialized tires are also way cheaper than the Maxxis tires, so there's another plus there. I don't know, people always talk about getting flat tires and stuff. I have noticed absolutely zero difference between the Maxxis tires and the Specialized tires. If you're gonna get a flat, if you're gonna tear a sidewall, it's gonna happen regardless. Doesn't matter what brand of tires you have on your bike. The one thing I will say about the Purgatory tires is they don't quite offer the same level of grip as a DHR2 and the 3C compound. Just had a couple moments where the front end pushed a little more than I thought it would, and it's really scary. Laid the bike down a couple times because of it, but generally they're pretty good, and I haven't had too many issues. They're probably like 95% as good is what I would expect or would be used to on a Maxxis tire. So to that end, I like them. I'll probably keep using them just because they are so much cheaper. Now let's talk about SWAT. This is probably one of my favorite things about this bike. I would say it's almost as life-changing as a dropper post. Almost. I used to carry a backpack, and now I don't. So I carry a tube, a pump, some tape wrapped around the pump, zip ties, CO2, some tire levers, tire plugs, tire boots on every ride. All that stuff is inside the bike. I never forget it at home. It's always there when I need it. So I love that. It adds a bit of weight to the bike. Yeah, sure, I just took my nice lightweight carbon bike and I filled it up with junk and now it's heavy. But you know what? It doesn't really matter. I find that I can still do all of the stuff that I like to do. The bike is still fun and poppy and playful. And you know, you look at World Cup race guys and they're putting weights on their bike to make it more stable. So maybe I'm onto something. I really like the mini tool on the bottle cage. It's always there. It's always ready for action. If someone has an issue, usually I'm the first guy that has a tool out because it's right there and it's easy to get. The chain breaker and the spare link in the top cap, I like to have that. I've never personally used it, but other people have used it. And it worked pretty well. It's a pretty good system. I really like it. So let's talk about riding the bike. To start out with, usually, at least around where I live, you have to climb. There are some shuttle options, but a lot of the really good stuff, you have to climb to get to it. It's just part of life. Climbing is not something that is my favorite. I do it out of necessity. So having a bike that climbs for me is important, but it's not the most important thing. I'm not a racer. I'm not trying to get to the top of the Strava leaderboards for the climbs. So I'll be the guy happily at the back of the pack, cruising along in my lowest gear, biding my time and saving my energy for the descent. All that said, the bike actually climbs really well. I never have to touch the compression lever on the shock. Tend to sit a lot while I climb, so I don't get out of the saddle and smash on the pedals unless absolutely necessary. So maybe if you're the kind of guy that does that, you'll want to play with that compression lever a little bit, but I don't really have to. And I've enjoyed this bike. I actually kind of enjoy climbing sometimes because of this bike, so that says something right there. Now let's talk about going downhill, because that's really why we buy these bikes. You know, despite the fact that they are great kind of all-around trail bikes, the quiver killer, some might say, we buy these bikes because that going downhill is what's most important to us. When I look back at when I started mountain biking nearly 20 years ago, riding downhill is what got me hooked. That's the main reason I still ride today. I only climb so I can go down. And this bike is excellent at that. It's very stable. The tweaks to the geometry of the 2018 model year pay dividends when things get really rough and rowdy. You kind of point and shoot. It goes where you put it, but it's still kind of nimble and playful enough to pop around and kind of double up on little gaps and stuff like that. So it's almost too fast sometimes. It's because it's so comfortable at speed that, you know, it just likes to go fast. And I've heard it in other reviews that, you know, compared to a lot of other kind of quote unquote enduro bikes out there, this one is like made for racers, and that's kind of my riding style. I ride fast and loose, and that's what I like to do. So I would tend to agree with that statement. You know, it is a very fast bike. It likes to go fast. That's when it's in its happy place. That's when it performs its best. If you're riding the bike at like 50%, it's not going to be as fun. It's the kind of bike that you got to ride at like 8 or 9/10 to really get the most out of it. So I love this bike overall. It's you know, something that I really enjoy having as my one and only mountain bike. It does everything that I need it to and more. You know, I would definitely consider another enduro in the future, just because of how nimble it is, how versatile it is, how playful it is. There's another thing: 29-inch wheels aren't playful. That's the misconception. They're wrong. They need to ride this bike. This bike is super fun. It's super playful. It jumps really well. It's stable in the air. I can whip it. I can get all sideways and goofy with it. And yeah, it's a fun bike. You just have to ride it. It's a fun bike all around. Just go try one. If you haven't ridden one, go give one a try. So that's the bike check and review of my 2018 Specialized Enduro Elite 29. Let's go ride bikes soon.